Hello and welcome to the Uptick podcast, a series of conversations hosted by me, Minna Dundas, and the artists, curators and creatives shaping South Africa's rapidly evolving art world. There really is an extraordinary level of creative activity happening in this country right now, and the Uptick exists to amplify these voices and stories, connecting them to the wider audience they most certainly deserve. You may or may not have seen me on Instagram running from gallery to artist studio to art fair, interviewing artists and creatives for a series of short 90-second reels about their practice. This podcast is an extension of those interviews, an inside guide to one of the world's most exciting art ecosystems, where we get to sit down and really get to know the people behind the work. Today, I'm visiting the studio of emerging Cape Town-based artist Aaron Philander, whose practice uses an assemblage of found objects, whether tools, old wood, discarded materials, to hold and explore memory, working through questions of coloured identity and the socio-political legacies of apartheid systems of labour and control. You probably won't be able to tell when listening to Aaron speak, but he only graduated from Michaelis School of Fine Art in 2024, and since then he has exhibited with AVA Gallery, featured in Everard Reed's Cubicle series, and most recently completed a residency at Lemkus Gallery under the mentorship of Jared Leite. What's so inspiring about Aaron's story is hearing just how actively he has created opportunities for himself, networking, building his name, pushing his practice forward, all of the things that can make such a profound difference to building a sustainable and fulfilling career, because let me tell you, being an emerging artist in South Africa is certainly not for the faint-hearted. Hello, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me here in your studio space to have my first podcast episode. I guess what I would really like to start with is a bit of bio, a bit of background on you. So Are you Cape Town born and raised?
Yeah, I was born in Cape Town, grew up in Plumstead area, went to school in Cape Town.
This is from day one.
This is from day one, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your experience growing up here and when you were first introduced to art, through museums, or through friends, through gallery shows. When do you first feel that you connected with art?
My mom and my parents, they always say, oh, I'm creative. I've been drawing or painting or drawing, making art since they can remember, since I was a young age. So during high school and primary school, I loved just doing art. They were my favorite subjects. And then I went to Michaelis School of Fine Art. It was never a question of, okay, I'm going to study art because that's what I want to do. But I wasn't sure of, how the art world is or what happens, the logistics, how things actually run and what art is in that way. And I came from Waimu Boys School, and I always really had a surface level of what art is and conceptualizing. And then going to Michaelis, it helped broaden how I speak about things or how I think about things. I think it was third year. I told my parents, okay, I want to become a full-time artist. There's nothing else I really want to do. And then in fourth year, I was like, that's what I'm going to do, fully confident in it. I started getting aware or knowing what certain galleries are and who people are. That was in fourth year.
Fourth year.
Yeah.
Was there a moment when you were deciding to both study and then pursue it full time where someone took your work seriously, gave you that inspiration? Because I can imagine it's a very scary subject to commit yourself to doing when you're obviously young and it's quite an uncertain career path. Was there
definitely
a specific person or moment that inspired your decision?
I think my lecturers or supervisors at the time, it was this materiality project in third year. And that sort of sparked my interest in what I'm doing or gave me that confidence in art. In this academic sphere in Michaelis, I had this confidence in myself to do this or pursue it. But in fourth year, when things like demo started happening, demo projects.
For people listening who might not know, what is demo projects?
Demo projects was project space / gallery run by four of us, which was Luca Nicholas, Matt Watt, and Tom Simmons, and myself. And that, Luca Nicholas started it. He's an artist as well. He's a painter. And this was his baby. When you ask me who gave that confidence in myself, he came to me a year before demo project started. And he was like, I'm going to start a project space and I want you to show your work in it. So this was the first show before we even had things planned or before we were even a collective group. So it was always his baby. And then from there, we sort of ran it, and demo projects was a space for young emerging artists to be in conversation with established artists and well-known artists. So with that, it was like they could be in the same show, or, you know, we could help them network in a way. And at the same time, we were networking. So I got a lot of confidence in myself from Luca. There's a possibility. You can almost like dream in a way. If you want to be an artist, you can be an artist. And he would really bring me out my comfort zone and help me connect with people. And that's when we started getting to know like the artist and the art world.
It's very inspiring. I would love to unpack that a little bit further, this idea of just taking initiative and getting the job done yourself, because I feel like that is such a defining factor around the South African art landscape, is you do see a lot of artists run project spaces, emerging artists who, you know, it's hard to connect with the gallery out of art school. It's hard to know how to take the next steps. So sort of, you see a lot of artists taking matters into their own hands. So what did that sort of tangibly look like, starting up a project space?
It was, so this was all in fourth year. So it was about, helped us prioritize things. I mean, he was in third year at the time when it started. I was in fourth year. So I was busy with my grad show work and thinking about that. Then we were also running demo projects, and then we were both working for Brett as well.
Brett
Sealer, yeah. So a lot of it was, I mean, obviously we funded it ourselves. We would save up money from working for Brett, and then we'd pay the rent. And then a lot of it was also like thinking about shows that we had to do. So we would, us four would have a meeting and just think about shows, which it was fun conceptualizing and thinking what we could make, but it also all costed money. So it was hard to sometimes put those things to happen.
I guess that's also is going to be my next question, is what are the pitfalls of running a project space? Like, they're so needed and they create so many new opportunities and access points for new emerging artists, but then at the same time they must be incredibly difficult to run from a financial standpoint. And as you say, you're also trying to complete your fourth year at Michaelis. So talk to me a little bit about the trials and tribulations of running a project space like this.
Yeah, again, it's the funding and the money for it. It was a lot, not mentally, but we were just always busy. But when like finding that confidence in ourselves, or, you know, believing in ourselves, demo specifically helped us network and connect with the whole art community. So at the same time where we would put on these shows that would get attention, it sort of built this community of artists where young artists would come, established artists would come, and we would just sort of zone in. We would get the alcohol and the beers for people to come. We'd be like, okay, what time do we open? What time do we stay closed? Or do we go to the Kimberley Hotel afterwards? We'd have to think about the posters and designs, and how do we advertise this, and how do we get more attention for people to come? So it was a lot of thinking, which we didn't think we could do. We had the capacity to do, but we just did it. So we learned sort of how to curate shows. We learned the backgrounds of galleries and how galleries are run, because we would interact with directors. And similar as Luca believed that we could start a project space, so he believed in me. He'd help me network. He came to us one day and he was like, okay, I want to be an art fair. And we all looked at him and we were like, okay. But then we did in, what was it, 2025? Yeah, it was last year. We raised funds for it and we got our own booth in art fair.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then with that, like, we learned how to curate, and then we were standing there and just seeing all these galleries putting up shows, and it was almost daunting. We were like, what is going on? But at the same time, we felt like we belonged there, and a lot of people were supporting of us, like a lot of people. Emma and Emma van der Mava and Nicola Bailey, so supportive. Brett Sealer helped us a lot. Warren Maroon and Ed Young. We really had this community of not only supporters, but like mentors, which like would help guide us, you know, into making shows that were really cool.
Insane.
But yeah, it had its time. I think it started getting very busy, and like financially it was a lot. And then we were also wanted to focus, I think, on our art careers. But it was nice because I think I owe a lot of what's happening, or my art career, my art practice, to demo, because it put my name out there.
Also, how incredible. I mean, there's just no better way of learning than by doing. Like pushing yourself into those uncomfortable situations where I definitely am not able to do this, and then you actually just take the step and you're like, oh, okay, fine, on to the next, we can keep going.
And you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to curate a show, or I don't know. And it did come down to just doing it. I think hosting, I don't know how many people would come. It's a matter of just doing it. A lot of the shows as well, I think one of the shows was called, I have a pamphlet here somewhere. These were like the little pamphlets.
Oh, nice.
So this is when we flooded the space.
This is
Yeah,
so good.
so I mean, I'm pretty sure Matt designed this, and then at UCT there were parking tickets. So he took a picture of the parking ticket, edited the title, the date, signed like demo, and then we would stick it on all the cars in Michaelis campus.
Great marketing.
Yeah, so it was like, I mean, and that was like his idea, and then with the show happened, we flooded the space, came into the space, the water's gone, it's leaked out.
Wait, hold on. Back up a second. I've seen this.
Yeah.
I didn't attend the show, I don't think, but I saw it on social media. You physically flooded
Yeah.
the space,
Yeah.
water.
So we like, I'm trying to figure out what the prompt was, if I can remember. I think we had a leak in the space, and under projects was also a project space run by Luke Evans, Guy Simpson, Mitchell, and Brett. They also had the same leak, I think, and then it got fixed, and then it like happened again. So I think that was the prompt to it. We wanted to people just to come in the space, a flooded space, have to take off their shoes, walk in this flooded. It wasn't even big. It was like this high, and then hang up their shoes and be able to like talk to each other or just engage and have a beer. Yeah. So it was cool.
I don't think I've seen a show like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Very innovative.
But then yeah, a lot of like trial and error. Like we walked into the space and the water was gone, and we were like, oh no, and or it was like leaking through the door into the parking lot, and we were like, so a lot of like stress happened with running.
Teaches you how to overcome obstacles.
Or just like just hide the fact it's happening. I think we put like, I don't know what we put by the door that just goes and we're like, cool, let's just go with the show, let's just run it. People want to see it. So it was a lot of learning, trial and error, but also we were so young.
It's the time to do it.
Yeah, it was the time to do it. And I think we got a lot of attention for it from these shows and this art community. But yeah, I think it really put our names in conversation with, let's say, established artists, but also because we were actively doing something.
Yeah.
I think we like...
People sort of gravitate towards that.
I think we like bridged the market because at the time there wasn't a lot of spaces giving young emerging artists opportunities or giving them a space where they can just be seen.
Still a problem today.
Yeah.
We need more.
Yeah. But there is like slowly I think things are happening. I think it is a beautiful space for community.
That's amazing.
Which was
how when you first started it, because I know that artists like Suzanne Leblom, obviously Brett Seeler, Ed Young, correct me if I'm wrong, were all sort of involved and around with demo projects. So how when you first started did you connect with that more established group of artists?
So Luca, it's again Luca, he assisted for Brett before I started assisting for Brett with him. So he knew Brett and he sort of networked, because I think Brett, he like gives a lot of opportunities. So I think he networked Luca a lot. Luca would come with him to meet people. And at the time, Kimberley was still open. Kimberley Hotel, it's just on Roland Street, and that's where a lot of like artists would go. So there, like Warren Maroon, Ed Young, Brett Seeler, a couple of them would still go there. And then Luca brought me to meet Ed and Warren and then the rest of Demo, and that sort of became like a meeting spot. Because I remember they used to tell us stories of what the Kimberley Hotel was, and it was an artist bar. Back in the day, like all these artists would go there just to have a drink and just not necessarily talk about art. There was a community there. And then
importance of community, okay?
Yeah, no, exactly. And then I think it started getting, no one went, it was just a few of them. And then when Demo started up after Under, we sort of got more people going to Kimberley again. We had a party, it was like a block party. And the whole art community was there. It was insane. Like the whole Kimberley place was like packed. I think there were like over like 150 people there. Maybe I'm exaggerating. But it was like everyone, like a lot of the gallerists and directors were there, a lot of artists, a lot of curators. And yeah, it felt like this community.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of those people I got to know from Brett and Luca.
Yeah.
And then Demo also got to know them. They've also just become really good mentors. Especially Warren Maroon, especially Ed Young, Brett, obviously.
That's incredible.
So it wasn't just using them to get to know things. I think we started having beers there, and they're friends.
Something that I've noticed, and how it's also part of how I became familiar with your work, is I see that literally this group of artists that you're now saying is in a social way are all friends and hanging out and mentors to you, but I sort of picked up on them as all being very similar conceptually with using a lot of found materials in their practice, which is something obviously is what you do with your work. And I was wondering, is it through sort of meeting them, networking and doing demo projects that inspired your practice and body of work?
I definitely would say they are inspiration. I think Warren's a very big inspiration of mine, especially like what he speaks about and what he uses to make his work. My like the materiality of like me using found materials and found objects, that came, it was in third year. It was like a materiality project at Michaelis where they got you to like think further, like, okay, what is the purpose of using this? What is the purpose of using that? And then when you got to a point of like, okay, I finally got something, they'd be like, what is the purpose of using that? And then, so like constantly questioning why you're using this material. And in that project, I used cardboard and mercurochrome and varnish, and I was making these like wounds, the five holy wounds of Christ. So I was making them out of cardboard, and okay, cool, where does cardboard come from? It's wood. Where does like the mercurochrome and the monkey blood, you would use that to heal wounds, and now I'm using varnish, something that's treating wood. You know, it's just these back and forth. What is this? Use this? What's the correlation between that? And then the end of third year and into fourth year, I started using these found materials. I liked like the shed year was full of stuff. A lot of like my grandpa's stuff from his like shed from his old house. And that's where my grad show project was called The Shed, because it was using lots of these found materials. And I think what prompted that was I just liked scavenging and looking for things, sort of feeling like a kid again, where you would scavenge and you would hear a toolbox or chest open and the lock clink together. It was sort of like an adventurous thing. And in my grandpa's old house, in his garage, I wasn't like allowed to touch anything, because I just want to like, I'd see all these tools and he'd be like, no, because he liked everything like quite ordered. Yeah. And then I don't know, it felt like Lego, just using these found materials and putting them together. And I also just found them really beautiful. Put them in a space, like a clean space where they can be seen. They're like rusted and weathered, and this old wood that has like their own like narrative to them, you know, they have their own story. I think Warren's practice specifically was a good inspiration just of his application of these objects and how he puts them together. But because I majored in painting.
That's what I was also going to ask you. Yeah. Did you explore different avenues of art before you stumbled across objects?
It was so weird. Like, people always like, you majored in painting. I didn't pick up a paintbrush as soon as that started the year. I just picked up like objects, or I found stuff and I put them together. And I think it was the thinking behind painting, thinking of like a composition and what colors work together and, you know, how a painting looks. I was using that thinking and using it for objects and sculptures.
Amazing. So you're very drawn to sculpture, doing more like
like making. I think I like getting my hands dirty, like building things. Like my grandfather was a builder, he was a carpenter, you know, he used his hands a lot, and I think I've always just wanted to build things, because it's like adult Lego. I feel like
adult Lego, love
like
that.
adult Lego. Yeah.
And then I guess looking at your practice in a bit more detail, from what I understand from one of your earlier shows with AVA, your work was very autobiographical, very, very personal, exploring your cultural heritage, your lineage through these found objects. And now you've shifted slightly, am I right, from doing your recent residency at Lemkus into something a bit broader, looking at sort of broader socio-political themes, but still using found objects. Can you talk to me a little bit about that transition?
Yeah. So the AVA show was a bit of a transition from my grad work, the shed. Not actually a transition. It was speaking about the same thing. I was speaking about a lot of personal experience, a lot of, I think, my nana. It was titled Nana's Kitchen, and it was looking through these archives of found materials from my grandfather's tools, curating them together to sort of speak about this, just who my nana was and my experience with trying to understand colored identity, because I felt like I lost that. And
throughout
growing up, I think I was in spaces where I picked up certain habits and I just felt like I lost this colored identity or colored heritage. So I used like Nana's Kitchen sort of as a way to understand this or reclaim it. And this was actively searching through stuff, scavenging stuff, looking through their old books or newspapers or kitchen utensils, and then obviously my grandfather's tools, and then putting it in the space or in the studio and like looking at them and saying, how do I put this together? You know, it was very much like very intuitive, but also thinking about memory and identity and my nana and my grandfather. And then in the residency,
For people listening, the Lemkus residency, tell me a bit about that. We know Lemkus obviously is a gallery space and run by Jared. He does offer residencies to emerging artists. So it was yourself and was it Smiso?
Smiso said it, yeah.
Tell me a bit about the residency.
So the residency started, I want to say like 16th of April.
Okay.
If I'm pretty sure. 16th of April, because it was a 6-week or 7-week residency. I've always been close with Jared since like 4th year. Help him on odd occasions if he needed help, like putting up a show, or we would just have conversations about art. And he's also been a great mentor to me. And I think it was always a thing of we want to work together and put up an exhibition, which would be like the residency. And I told him when I like brought the proposal to him and the prompts, I told him like a few goals of what I want to achieve in the residency. And that was, I want to find or experiment with a new visual language, which is something I'm not sort of comfortable with or something that's very new to me. I also want to broaden my research and my understanding of not just colored identity, but also South Africa and apartheid, and, you know, speak more broadly and do more research. But yeah, those were like the sort of prompts that I wanted to do. And I think at the start, I was like, I do want to make these kinetic sculptures because my Cubicle at Everard or at AVA, they hinted at, you know, something that could move. And I was very excited of, oh, what would people think of something that can move, or if they're interacting with it, it can move. So I was putting a lot of pressure on that. And then I started making the first thing, and then I sat there and it was like a week and I was like, okay, I wish I studied engineering because everything needed to be calculated and everything needed to be a specific measurement, which is not how I work. I work very haphazardly. Or I
was gonna say, when you're working with found materials, it's like found this, found that, and then assemble.
I just screw stuff together. So like I was sitting there for like a week trying to figure out how this thing could move. I have like no close understanding of mechanisms and how they actually function that way. So I was doing a bit of research, but
I must say you smashed it. I went to the exhibition earlier and Jared was showing me the moving. We're talking about the moving hand.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So that was
it's brilliant.
So that was the first. That was literally the first work I was working on in that residency. I think I was putting a lot of pressure on things moving and thinking, okay, this new thing that I want to experiment with, that's the thing. I don't know what happened. I picked up this like found box, or this found thing we got from the Malta market, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna sculpt like a piece of my hand just with an angle grinder and a Dremel. And then I started like putting it together, and like I added a piece of wood and I put it up, and then I was looking at it and I'm like, what is happening? And then Jared came in as well and he was like, oh, it looks like a landscape. And I was like, why am I making landscapes? I don't know. There's no like correlation in it, I guess. And then I made 2 more and I was like, okay, I kind of like it. It was very like organic and it felt very free and it felt fun to make. There wasn't like any pressure. I was excited. I would go to sleep, be excited to come in the next day and just, you know, carry on. And that's what the, like art is and art practice is. I think it's being excited to create and not sort of staying stagnant. And it is easy to be stagnant in the art world in terms of like selling work and making money, which obviously I think about, but it's always been a thought of mine to not be stagnant. Like I do want to surprise people a bit with something new or they haven't seen me make. I started thinking, okay, what are these landscapes talking about? Why am I drawn to them? So I brought these files, these documents that I showed you, which were these bricklaying exercises that my grandfather had. And that was the first prompt to the project, which I showed Jared. And we were very excited about it. It was a cool prompt in thinking about labor and the things my grandfather was doing. He was a builder, he was a carpenter, he was a bricklayer as well. And then I was just thinking about landscapes and then these diagrams. And I was like, what is their correlation? And then I started thinking about the visual language of these diagrams and how they actually look, like the font, the text. And then I somehow got in the thing of spatial planning and urban planning during apartheid and looking at Group Areas Act and forced removals. And then I was just thinking about the connection between labor and spatial planning and situating people based on race or based on their skills. You know, my grandfather was seen, I mean, he's a colored man worker who's seen as a semi-skilled laborer or an artisan. We would do like bricklaying, carpentry. And then I started thinking about the language of where do these diagrams date back to, all these spatial planning, urban planning diagrams. And I looked at, they were always seen from an aerial view. They were never diagrams taken from the side because they wanted to cut off emotion. They wanted to have full control over the land, over the way people would move, over what they did, how they thought. I was looking at routes to work. My grandfather would take
on the train.
Yeah, on the train, which were in these diagrams, they were seen as like buffer zones. They needed people of color to be far enough to be segregated, but they also needed them close enough to be able to work and build these structures of violence. I guess where my grandfather take this route to the Simonstown Naval Base, and he used his hands to actively build the structure of violence of like the naval base, and then also sort of thinking about the psyche behind it. My grandfather was very hands-on, did things step by step. He kept his tools in order, very disciplined, very strict. And I always saw it as like just a characteristic of him, and like a personality trait, which I mean it could have been, but then also thinking about how this urban planning and spatial planning enforced the sense of control on people. They wanted not only to control the land and how they moved, but they wanted to control how they think and what they do in order to be productive or in order to do what they had to do. So I started thinking about, okay, is there a correlation to the way my grandfather is into, I don't know, just, yeah,
Wow.
I'm thinking about that.
Big themes. Did you have a very close relationship with your grandfather?
My grandfather is he was very strict and disciplined, but I was also very naughty and very like mischievous. So like I think he was be very like soft to my sister and soft to me as well. But like if I needed to be shouted at, or if I was playing with these tools or like climbing on the roof, I'd be shouted at. I think I was closer to my nana. So she passed away, I want to say like 2-3 years ago. But she was always very gentle with me, very soft. And Nana's kitchen sort of spoke about that. I think things that were very sensitive and very soft, but I was using a lot of harsh materials, a lot of dangerous spikes or nails. So the application of the materials and the artworks there, it was speaking about something very soft and sensitive, my grandma, but the work came out a bit more rugged and a bit more harder. And then it was in relation to my grandpa, who was much more stricter and much more, disciplined, and the work came out a bit softer.
Interesting.
It was a lot more painterly, which was very like unintentional. I think it just happened. I think for Nana's kitchen, I was using my grandfather's tools. I was finding all these things that he collected over the years, and I felt this like weird guilt of, okay, I'm taking this archive and now I'm putting it up in a gallery, and he has dementia as well, so he's forgotten all of this. So he doesn't even like remember the tools or what he used them for. So it was a bit of guilt, like, okay, I'm taking it to exhibit it in a sort of commercial space where the work's gonna get sold.
Repurposing.
Yeah, repurposing. But on the other hand, it's giving them a voice or speaking about their experiences and, their story in a way. But also I was sort of relearning what my grandfather has forgotten, relearning how to...
Also commemorating.
Yeah.
It's honouring, and it's an act of commemoration. Even if it isn't a commercial space, I guess that's also the double-edged sword of being an artist, is producing work for the sake of producing work and what it means to you personally, but then also having to sell and having to sustain yourself
exactly
as a career, which I guess is the age-old struggle.
Yeah.
Tell me, and looking forward with your practice and your work, what are the plans? Are you wanting to continue this exploration of found objects and sculpture and looking at wood specifically, or are you wanting to explore different avenues?
I'm still obviously interested in working with found materials. I think there's something in like found wood and wood that comes from maybe family members' houses or just somewhere else, wood from the Milnerton market and things, because they carry their own story. I'm also interested in, I think at the Lemkus residency, I was just using plain like pine wood for some of the works and just looking at the materiality in them. So using an angle grinder and taking away, varnishing or just staining the wood, and then using the angle grinder again and taking away. So this thing of like adding, then taking away, adding, then taking away, I'm very interested in that and that way of working. And then also looking at these found materials and seeing, is there like a better way that I can apply them or put them together that looks a bit more cleaner? That was also another goal of the residency, was to, how can I put a bit more care into a work and finish it a bit better with the frames that were like this dark, it was sort of like that dark color there. But it was like a process of, I put two stains of dark oak wood, and then one stand of espresso, and then one layer of sealant, and then one layer of dark oak, and then one layer of espresso. So it was like a recipe, but it was like just that extra care into the work to finish it a bit better.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then so these painterly works that I've been doing, like,
And is that a slightly newer aspect of
yeah,
what you're saying, which has come out of the Lemkus residency?
yeah, this like where the works do look a bit more painterly, and there was this, I used this blue tape. It almost looked like enamel paint. It was this blue painter's tape, I think, and then I toned it down with stain. But it was also like, it got to do with like the spatial planning and this dividing. Jared used the same tape to divide some parts of the exhibition. So yeah, that was very new, using varnish and the actual wood itself. But I'm still interested in, I mean, works like these that are a bit more assemblage rather than just one flat surface. Yeah. And then kinetic works as like, just as like a long-term project.
You will be able to conquer them.
I do want to do it and figure it out, but like, I think that's the beauty of with art. There's just so many possibilities.
See which way it takes you.
Yeah, and I see what happens. Like the Lemkus residency was so unexpected of how the work came out, and I think that was beautiful in itself.
Yeah. And so needed. We need more. Well, this is going to be my closing question for you, and I guess I'm answering it first, but I think this is something we need so much more of in the Cape Town art scene, is supporting emerging artists, creating these new opportunities, spaces where they can explore freely.
Yeah.
The Lemkus residency, I know Ikshan Adams has his break room residency space. Like, they're so crucial and fundamental, and you're very lucky to have done one.
Yeah, no, I'm super fortunate and grateful to Jared as well. And just, I think having a space like that, like, I mean, break room and a Lemkus residency gallery, there should be more spaces like that, especially in Cape Town. I think it's important for people to not be so stagnant. I think I could have even pushed myself a lot more. Let's maybe use this space to just make a work or a body of work that's not sellable, but just me using my thoughts. But I think the Lemkus residency was a space for that balance of, you know, thinking about what work could sell, thinking of like a sustainable practice, but also a space where I could push myself, and I was happy about it. But yeah,
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you.
No, my absolute pleasure. This has been a very exciting conversation, so thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Uptick podcast, this my very first episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please do follow along on Spotify and YouTube. And if you want to learn more about the South African art world in between episodes, then head on over to Instagram at the Uptick CPT.